Here we are, and we're going to do two side-by-side cone of visions. And I've drawn the first one, so if you want to go ahead and just draw one and set up for that, pausing it, and then catch up when, and keep going when I start drawing in, or you could set two up side by side like this, or you could do them on separate pages. Either way, I'm going to have two side by side to show a whole bunch of traditional frame setups like I started to talk about in the physical explanation lecture 1. Now we're really going to put in a whole bunch of little simple sketch ideas around and in the cone of vision to show all the variety you'd have, and so many that I wanted to do too. Okay? So remember, just real quick, this is our package. This is our, eye level. Put that over there as well. Eye level, picture plane, horizon line. We also have our center of vision, as you know. Then our station point, I've decided to put it that far away again to be near the edge of the camera space down there. And then the projected cone. So we have all the same work we just did before. And now what I want you to do is think about the fact that this is underneath your thinking when you're doing these sketches. So we really have it here, but we're really reversing it. We're doing this first and then the sketches over it. But in your mind or in your practice, if you start doing sketches with all this in mind, then we can easily see how this stuff really helps to be just underneath or in little tiny cobweb sketches and marks underneath your sketches. You can really get helped out by this to understand your options and stuff. So again, it would be in the reverse. We'd really sketch first and then draw back to this idea and think of it as we're drawing in our mind. So that's part of that 3D platform we're trying to build in our minds. Okay, so let's get started. Let's say I want to frame for a landscape I did a while ago where I didn't want the 1 point vanishing point in the picture. Keep my head out of the way here. So essentially, I drew the frame something like this, as I remember. Let me get up here so I'm not totally off. All right. Okay. So let's say my frame was kind of out of the cone of vision. It can be. It doesn't have to be by any means centered. That's only for film frames, because the camera's viewfinder, we can't divorce ourselves from the fact that we're in the center of our own view, because we're using a sequential tool, meaning the camera, because we're moving, has to show repeated images of slow turns, almost like animation or like animation in film. So we have to be at a center spot that is consistent in the frame. Whereas in traditional, we can pick any kind of cutout frame we want from anywhere in the cone. We don't, the scene doesn't change, it's still here. This is still the horizon line, make it clear. So here's some little mountains. We can get the idea of that. Okay, that doesn't change. We still have this whole view and perspective in 1 point, which we'll be doing, but the frame can be put anywhere. We can choose to only show this window if we want and nothing else. This isn't even considered. We consider the space around it, but we're just only showing in here. So that's our first frame. And let's say I have a building. And again, this was a old building here that I did a painting of. And the idea is I didn't want the 1 point vanishing point in the picture at all. I just wanted my material on my right side to lead to it. So I put the building down a little bit before. Here. Old building in front, and then of course we know it behaves like this casts back to the 1 point. We know that much because you're drawing to it. So the idea that once you actually pick a diminishment for your side planes in a sketch, you're actually implying they meet at the 1 point vanishing point. If you're drawing this as a face plane that's parallel to the picture plane, you're drawing in 1 point essentially. So we can change the frame anytime we want to be bigger or smaller, because this all exists as space if we want to show it. This will be distorted space as we move out of the cone. The idea, even with this very simple start, I can start thinking in terms of, okay, I want the eye level here, which I've already put across my frame, as a drawing idea, and I already am leading to a vanishing point on that eye level, which is here. So in reverse, we don't have any of this underneath. You're just thinking like that, and suddenly that thought appears and go, oh yeah, I'm drawing to this eye level, and I'm going to put a vanishing point about there, and you're drawing to it. Well, that immediately commits you to an idea pretty quickly that you're already positioning it somewhere in the cone. You don't quite know where yet until you figure out some other stuff. But we'll go ahead and say, okay, now we'll show the building is transparent, so we'll show that back corner coming through here. So now we have our two side planes. I want to overdraw them a bit. Our perpendicular planes going back to the VP. Okay. Now, we've already decided where our SP and our 45 is, but we're going to draw to it like we're pretending we're doing it for the first time, just in the sketch with, and feeling out where we want the 45. And by reversing the action of already knowing what's here, it's much easier to explain what I'm doing. But I could set the 45 anywhere I want. But once I set the 45 by going across kitty corner and setting a square to this, meaning I want the building to be as deep as it is wide to see what the square would look like. I know this real building where down here in the city I live in this area is actually only half as deep as it is wide. So I'll cut that in half. But the idea is I'm looking for, where do I want my 45 to say this total horizontal equals this depth? Okay, yeah, so I'd play with it and say, well, if I wanted it about half and then here and then the other half about there, I'd be putting around there. So let's just see where we cross and figure it out. So there it is. I'll put my kitty corner idea here. And let's just draw the 45 and say, okay, if I draw to that idea from my sketch, that's where the back plane is hit. So I'm going to go ahead and draw out the idea of the square of this building. It turns out I was pretty close. I was saying I wanted the square to be back here, but the building's only half as deep as it is wide, so I was about right. With a little bit of perspective foreshortening, it's about there. So let's just say I decided to make that commitment here and square this off, which I'm showing you now, before I drew in the 45. All I had was an eye level so far of our setup, and I knew where the 1-point vanishing point was because I was drawing to it, right? But I didn't know where to place the 45 until I sketched some and decided, yes, if that's the full depth compared to its width, or equal to its width, and I put that in a perspective half and say, okay, the building's now half as deep as it is if I split that in half. Well, that's about where I want my 45. I don't know where this is yet, but I draw to the corner of my square I've created, and I derive it. Now, what do I have? I have on my sketchbook, I have an eye level. This frame, this building started out in 1 point, the perpendicular projections to where I said I wanted my vanishing point, and now I just figured out where I could have a 45-degree vanishing point or measuring point to the left of my sketch. That commits me to this entire setup. I have no choice now. So I could do it that way, or I could do it with the cone. With the same way, I could say, well, the cone's here, and I don't mind some distortion. I could have put the cone here, which would put this projection mark out here. And when I worked back at the proper angle, we all know the cone is 30 degrees up till the eye level, so it's really 60 degrees back down, 90, or 30 up. So by simply reversing the idea of where I want the cone, I find my SP automatically. And if I find my SP, I automatically get my 45. In this case, I wanted to find the 45-degree measuring point first. That automatically, going down at 45 degrees back here, which always happens, I find my SP. Because I found my SP from this little sketch, knowing that my 1-point vanishing point is on the center of vision. So how can I figure this out and reverse it so easily? It's simple. We started with a committed eye level. We knew that we wanted the 1-point vanishing point kicked out to the right of the picture at about this eye level. That commits us to a center of vision, which we know the SP is on. So we're working backwards in thought here. Okay, I decided, well, I don't mind if the cone has a little distortion here, goes out a little, that's not important. What I really want is the right depth of square so I can get this feeling for when I cut that in half. Because again, this building is only half as deep as it is wide. So I'm giving myself a square which is equally as deep as it is wide, and then I'm cutting it in half for my composition. So ultimately my desire would be to have the side of the building actually be here in the sketch. But I needed the square to figure that out because I just halved it. That kitty corner to the back of that imaginary square, how I wanted it compositionally. So far I've only done things that are driven from my compositional desires in this sketch. I have not been forced to find any of this perspective setup. That's not what I'm doing. I'm thinking of exactly the view I want as a drawer artist person. Then I'm making the perspective subordinate to that sketch idea. That's the important thing as an artist. We're subordinating and we're ordering the perspective of what we want it to do because we know how to use it, okay? So I find the square and I find that 45 degree measuring point from there. Then I reverse my thinking back to here because I already had my center of vision knowing where the vanishing point was. I already committed to an eye level. I reverse back, kind of drawing this idea of this 45-degree idea back to the SP. Now that I've got a committed SP, I know I have to project up at 30 and 30. So I know this is my cone now, centered around my 1-point VP, and I know it goes through my sketch right there. So by a real fast reversal after starting a sketch, you can figure out how it relates to the entire cone of vision setup. And you could go ahead and, if this was a more complex picture, you could plot 2-point vanishing points, you could do everything in a large digital file. You could figure all that stuff out and then just crop in a little bit outside that frame and bump it up to 350 DPI, and you can start digitally painting. Or you could transfer this idea very loosely and very carefully with a wooden stick that's a piece of trim that's really straight that you pick out from Home Depot or something, and you could draw this on a 8-foot by 6-foot canvas. And if you had your wits about you, you could find your eye level on the sides of your studio wall or imagine where they are. You could use real verticals. You could use the idea of where the 45-degree measuring point would be on your studio wall as a point. All this stuff is working for you if you just step back from your image, even if it's larger, and think about it. This whole thing is living underneath all the time. Again, like the constellations and the stars, they're always there. We just can't see them all the time, or we choose not to, okay? So that's how I reverse this one. So there it is. Now I know we got this first, but the idea is I have to show this first to show you the process of coming up with frames and reversing back to the idea of this already being here. So in a sense, when I started my sketch and committed to that 45, then all this just suddenly appeared because it's always there, all right? I know it sounds weird and confusing, but that's the way the thinking. You have to reverse your thinking and be a bit of a mental acrobat with that 3D platform we've been talking about. So I know these are really simple sketches. The point is not about the complexity of the drawing. It's understanding how to use the perspective correctly. We could make this infinitely complex with cars in front to all different 2-point angles drawn with perfect ellipses and incredible creatures running around. They'd be amazing. It's like, God, just blow us away, right? Well, that doesn't teach you how to learn perspective and use it. Only using perspective in a basic way and then getting more and more complex with it teaches you how to use it. The drawing part is separate. That you have to learn a lot about anatomy and sculpting and landscaping, landscape painting, all that stuff is important. And of course, so is perspective. So we're learning the basics. All right, so let's go on to some faster ones now that I've kind of explained my idea. And we're going to start one up here, let's say. It's going to be here. All right, just for the heck of it, we'll do a more of a vertical setup. Okay. Completely separate idea now. We still have the same setup surrounding it, but you decide to start a sketch of this proportion. You know that, a frame of this proportion, and you know you want the eye level somewhere down here below the frame. You just know that. And you're just saying, okay, I basically will pick this area to finish the 1-point vanishing point so the side planes go. Okay, so what am I doing? I don't know, it's like Dracula's castle or something. So we could draw a corner. We could set out a composition like this and say, oh, okay, then the side of that castle had diminishment to there, quite a ways back. I don't know how deep it is. It might be incredibly deep and huge. I'm not sure. I've got my corner. I'm just designing at this point. This is doing thumbnail designs, but instead of not relating the perspective, which perspective is design by essence, it's a compositional tool. This can be an extremely simple posterized design, and there you have it. It would be considered graphic. So we are designing, we are using the graphic, and we're building. So the idea is there's a tower behind, possibly. Okay, so that's back there. The perspective might be something like this turret. Okay. So the idea is there's some kind of turret back there, some ancient castle. There's another shape coming up like this. And we just keep drawing to the facts of how we want the castle to look a bit, but also the facts of where we think we want our vanishing point and basically our level. Remember, eye level. Remember, the vanishing point commits us, the minute we draw to it in 1 point, it commits us to an actual eye level, if we're in 1 or 2 point, and it commits us to a center of vision. It has to, especially in 1 point, because the 1-point vanishing point is always on the center of vision crossing the eye level. So you're automatically committed in 1 point once you make that decision. You automatically have an eye level and you automatically have a center of vision. There's no way to escape it, okay? So we'll have that side plane go off like this. Okay, I'm sketching. There it is. Oh, I want the depth of the castle like here. Fine. Okay. Okay. That's happening. And then I'm not, how do I justify being up here? I don't want it to say it's on the ground necessarily. Maybe the foundation of the castle is right here, but we're actually on a really steep precipice that comes through like this, and breaks our frame a little bit. And we can show a figure then and say, well, the figure is a good deal forward from the castle. So they're like, where am I? When are the wolves coming? That kind of thing. And then another person could be straight down toward the vanishing point, that kind of little path, smaller and farther away. And again, you can just start playing with scale with these kind of ideas like we did of invisible bridges, and you could still measure and you could still use your 45. So the idea would be, where do I want a square, or to say a square would be here for an equal section of space from, let's say, here, equally in depth. And if you decide, well, there's some design in the building that I have to find a foreshortened version of here compared to an equal depth, well, then I could just draw in the idea to our 45 and say, I choose this depth, but it just will happen to be the 45 we've chosen because we're showing both, the setup first and the thinking behind the sketch. But the sketch is coming first, and the commitment to what would be a square that we'd want compositionally is first. It then leads to a particular 45, completely independent of this sketch. This disappears now when we're only doing this. But because I want fairly conservative, flattened perspective, I'm only showing a little frame within the vast cone of vision. And so this, doesn't even come close to showing the eye level, but it's still truly in 1 point. It's not 3 point when we're looking up, because then the verticals would have diminishment going up to this center of vision here. They would be going like slightly like this, and they'd tilt out more and more as we got further away from the center of vision. But that's not happening. We're in 1 point still. We're just choosing to show a section, some of it being out of the cone of vision here, that part. So this part will slowly start distorting, but so what? It will be subtle enough where it won't matter, especially if you're doing a painting or something that doesn't have to be to camera because you're doing a traditional frame. Anyway, there's where that kitty corner of that shape I wanted strikes the back plane. So this flat horizontal space is now equal to that, and that seems satisfactory to me in my design. I say, yeah, that's about it. If I have something there like a huge banner draped over that goes around and is a square, that is a fine 45 for me. So I find my 45-degree measuring point. And again, because I know I have a center of vision, because I have a committed vanishing point for this little sketch, independent of this one, and I also have a committed eye level down here, that gives me, I have to work backwards to the center of vision from that chosen 45-degree measuring point I randomly got by just designing this, and I have to lead back now when I find my SP, so I could reverse it. And again, I did it by the 45. I could say, oh no, I don't mind if the cone comes by here. Then I could take that idea of the cone from here, simply come down to what I know is my eye level, and project back at 60 degrees here, back to here, and then I'd find my SP that way. So you can do it with where you want the cone, slamming it down to the eye level, and then coming back at 60, because we know it's 30, 60, 90, and then we find our SP that way. Or we find our 45, knowing that it's on the eye level, knowing this is our center of vision where the SP rests. You follow that down, follow this down, and sure enough, you'd get your SP again. In the SP, then you could put a whole bunch of 2-point work in there and do everything, and it would look correct. And yeah, some people say, oh, I've had enough experience, so I can just draw to that. Great, so do I. But the idea when you're learning this stuff, a lot of you don't understand how different 2-point things will look correctly, and mechanical perspective really helps you learn and remember correct, thoughtful drawing and angle relationships that you would never know if you didn't have the formal perspective. The thing these days is popular for people to do is say, well, I didn't really enjoy the formal, but I learned it, but I'm going to deny my students the formal and just tell them to draw really well. Well, the reason those very people that are teaching you draw really well is because most all of them, if they went to school anywhere before like 1995, 1992, in some of the more intense colleges had all this. And so anybody that's telling you that had college before 1995, you could essentially say is, oh, well, they got all this stuff, but I didn't. But they still expect me to draw really fast and well and understand where I'm going with all this. Well, what I'm saying and declaring to you is you wouldn't know this. This is stuff you have to learn and practice and take careful notes on. Then you can apply it in freehand drawing getting canvases and murals up the side, all that stuff. Yeah, obviously, but that's something like a language. You have to learn it first before you can speak it well. And this is a language, and you need to learn how to speak in its basics and speak eloquently in it. Then you can do anything you want with it. You know, I'm not telling you what to do with it. I'm saying this is how you learn it, okay? So there's our 45, and I'll draw the square back. So the idea is, there is the idea of that imaginary square we wanted like something draping over. So now we could say, oops, go like that. Sorry. So that would be, could be a draped huge banner or something, whatever, but that's the design you wanted. That happens to make a little square in there that goes to this 45, and that reverses the commitment to all this setup from that little sketch again, all right? So that's that one. Let's do another one here. Maybe we're above the horizon line a little bit. We don't have to be equal though, so we'll have this one end right there. Go out here a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit below the cone. I'm just drawing it in quick here. Okay, comes down like that. Okay, so that's my frame. My new frame. I'll make it a little darker so it's not confusing. Okay. That's where I want to be for my next frame. That's still my eye level horizon line, so that could still be in the desert in the eye level, but I choose to make my frame here now. Okay, so maybe we have a really straight road or something coming forward. And I have a reason to make a square on some weird pathway in the middle of the desert, but it's some metal, really weird, high-tech metal pathway. Okay, and then I want to draw a figure next to it. Figure's that tall. Okay, so we just got a little bit of scale, saying if the figure's around 6 foot, 5.5, whatever. But we still want to say, okay, where do I want that depth of that square? Well, you haven't done any of this setup. This is a brand new idea, a first-time sketch. It just started, and you're sketching out these ideas, but you've just committed to this. The eye level, you've already committed to the 1-point vanishing point with this little path, and that commits you to the center of vision in your mind forever. Okay, now, working backwards, I could go, okay, where do I choose to make a square? This deep? That's too deep, that's too shallow. Probably about there, whatever, and you just happen to end up here. Okay? There it is. And so now you're committed. Let me just go ahead and finish that out. Now, oops, that's too much. Now you're committed to that square. That square, that one choice of how deep to make that first section of the path that you're going to repeat and draw way into the background and forward, all that, that just committed you. That one square laying down committed you to this entire setup like that. Because you already had your eye level, you already had your center of vision from your vanishing point, but we didn't have a reference to depth until you made that square. Then we come back to a diagonal either way we want, and we are committed then to a 1.45-degree measuring point, which brought back at 45 gives you your SP. And because we project from the SP at 30 and 30 for the cone, it commits you to the cone. You're committing to this entire setup instantly because you made that one decision with that square. This is really important. So even though these are very casual little, thumbnail sketches, the idea and thinking behind them is very formal. Okay, but it's all behind here. You're not drawing all this out. You're doing like very, very light lines until you're really sure where you want your compositions. Then you go ahead and draw really beautifully or do your sketch style, your ideation style, whatever. It's the thinking underneath, and this is the kind of practice we need to do to get good at it. Okay, so next I'm like, okay, now I have that pathway, and now I can make a few other squares because I've come back and can do this. I got another section and I can come forward. So I just got 2 more sections real quick. And I could draw on and on. We already know that, so I'm just going to go ahead and shoot them in real quick. So now we got 3 proper squares, and we could go on and do the zigzag thing we've done before in the previous diagrams. Coming forward, you could review that. But we're not going to go into that. This is just a compositional talk. Next, you might have another road or part of a road coming forward, kind of rugged terrain here. And I want a car passing or something. I know I want that alignment to be here, but I'm like, how do I get reference on that? Oh, that's right. If a person could be shuttled across the picture plane to touch that, say, oh, the car's top is around that person's shoulder, let's say. And we've got a reference plane. And now suddenly we have a standing height for the car, even though I have to make a box for it first, right? And say, okay, foreshortened, I believe it's like that. It's passing by like that. It has to fit within there. A car isn't a block, but you're building the block for the car to get its basic dimensions and say, okay, it's raised this much. It's got ellipses, so if if I want, the ellipses would be something like this. Okay, touching the ground, more straight, but then this would curve maybe. You could get some kind of idea of how the front would behave. Possibly the windshield coming up. We don't quite figure out how wide it is, that kind of thing. It's a real ugly car. I'm not a car designer, so I apologize to all the ID people out there. But, it's starting to come up as something here as it passes by in scale, because I made that one reference plane from the shoulder and the ground straight across the picture plane as the passing car behaving to the 1 point. Okay? So the idea, I could go on and reference size here now. I'm totally free to reference. The reference point methods and the scaling we talked about is all alive and well in here. But the thing I want to do before I get all the cool, awesome stuff that blows everybody away because it's so incredibly drawn, which a whole bunch of people seem to know how to do these days. But the important thing is that from this one sketch, we see in our mind's eye, in our three-dimensional platform in our brain, this entire ability to understand one square commits us for the whole picture of a committed station point, which is really important, because then you're drawing to that idea consistently. Even though people aren't showing you that, there's very light lines underneath, and the idea of this. Someone can just put a tick on a paper like that, and you're going to go, oh, look, there's a tick over there, and ignore it. That's their SP. They're just not telling. A lot of people aren't explaining that's what they're doing. They're using their vanishing points, they're using measuring points, but there are these little ticks and tiny little thin marks that are like invisible once you do the drawing over them. So again, we completely wanted to design the sketch first and play with it, but there's an interaction. I can't just keep going with the sketch without committing to some real space, and that commitment to real space, like the square and referencing the car, how deep and long the car would be too, is a commitment to having to find and commit to a 45-degree measuring point. And the SP acting again like the diagonal one. Remember, if that's a standing square here, how do I find it? Oh, simple. If I say that's the height of the car on the side, just as an idea, the car would actually taper in a bit. We'll just say, oh, all I got to do is draw to that, just freehand, and I got it. That's the depth of my square. I don't need to pull out my ruler even. I can just draw to the idea of a little tick I put on making the SP. But if you're not aware of these things happening in people's drawing, well, I'll be really honest with you. Storyboard artists, still well into the 90s and the 2000s, all do this stuff. Yes, the 3D programs have taken over for this stuff, great, but we're talking about learning how to draw and keeping drawing alive and wanting to teach people drawing. Well, this method was used by storyboard artists and people that designed theaters back 300 years ago. All this stuff was alive and well for hundreds of years, being used just like this for the subject matter of their day. Okay, so this is not new. This has been, people have been drawing like, and the computer programs are used much the same way. It's just that in the computer programs, you're building and then viewing, but you're not actually drawing. Drawing has to be in perspective at the same time as you're making decisions about depth. Everything's happening at once in the drawing. That's why it's so important for you to be able to understand that we can draw to a really accurate plan in our minds in flat space, but we know we have to behave like this in 3 dimensions. We can do both at once because we're a person. We can think both in terms of plan, height, width, depth, all at the same time, and just start drawing in a real composition, but at the same time thinking about a flat plan with the real measurements too, if we want. Or we're just sketching, not knowing where we're going with it, but we get real spaces starting to behave to help us with our guesstimations. And that's what I wanted to get to with these sketches. We're just starting an idea, committing to it, then we've committed to all this stuff. Okay, so there's that one. So we've just started a simple idea, but we could keep going into a very complex picture as long as we keep all this referencing and a few of these ideas alive. We could get through this thing in a half hour on a canvas, maybe an hour, and then you're off to the races painting and everything is right. You don't have to go to bed and wake up the next day and go, oh crap, that looks like, oh, that's way too big. What was I thinking? That's not going to happen here because you've actually referenced real space with a real committed SP. And if you want to distort, then you could pull this frame bigger and larger out of the cone of vision by using these same estimation working backwards techniques. And you could pull this car even further out of the corner and have it really go, pulling out. You could do a whole bunch of stuff. You can exaggerate. You can use unrealistic gestural exaggeration in the picture. No one's policing you. I'm saying at least you know where it starts as being correct, and then you can push and pull it wherever you want. That's the reason I wanted to do these side-to-side cones, to be really clear about, don't get sold the idea that this stuff is all about measuring and ruins creativity. It's just ridiculous. You know, this is understanding space like a violinist has to understand how to read music, play scales, and compose. Then they might be one of the most progressive musicians in the world in jazz because they took all these ideas and did something brand new with it. That's what you want to do with your art. But these are the mechanics and these are the fundamentals, all right? These kind of thinking. Okay, enough of that. We'll go on now and continue on to this cone. Let me whip this cone up. I'm not going to really label it now that we know what we're doing. I'm just going to get my 30 and 30 again, and I'm doing this just to make it clear, but now I'll really put this in quickly. Okay. I'll go ahead and get my compass. There's my 1 point. We all know that's the 1 point vanishing point. That's our VP. There's our SP. I might as well put that person in too. Little head, body, feet, SP. Go ahead and put in the 45 on the side. Go and get our compass cone in. So I'm going to go to the right now with the 45, obviously. That would be convenient. Hopefully it's just in there. If it's not, you'll understand the idea. There it is. There's our 45-degree MP. Okay. It's a real 45. 30, 30, total of 60, all right? Okay, so it's just ideas underneath, but we'll draw them out because it's instructive. But at the same time, I want to convey a little bit of a sense of urgency to say, well, no, if I'm starting to memorize this stuff now, I've done the diagrams in order and listened, you should start, eternalizing this stuff and just have to make casual marks and not keep going, what's that again? Oh, wait, what? And go back. You'll get better at it, and these will be secondary thoughts, just like using a clutch car. If you drive a clutch, you don't even think about it. But the first 3 days, you're like, oh my God, I got to think this out step by step. But eventually, it's just subliminal. You're just like, boom, boom, boom. Okay, so the compass, here we are. We'll go ahead and catch our mark for our 30. And it's the same, so I'll go ahead. This compass tends to float, so I'll try to get clean with it. Okay. There's our cone. Okay, now let's get going. Do some faster ones. I'll sharpen my pencil slightly, but again, these are just real rough thumbnail ideas compositionally. So again, this is traditional behavior, putting the frame anywhere we want and then deciding depth and making some references in our mind that eventually lead backwards to the setup. But they all exist simultaneously the minute you start drawing. You're just not worrying about exactly this until you've got your compositional desires fulfilled. Then you work backwards to have the perspective help you, okay? All right, here we go. What shall we do next? That's a good idea. Okay, yeah, maybe I'll do something like this. So again, I'm specifically doing off-center ones to make it clear that of course you could be evenly centered in the cone anywhere you want to be, but I want to make asymmetrical decisions with the frames as opposed to the cone. So I'm deliberately making decisions that are based on not wanting to have too much of a centered effect in the cone in our views. So okay. Okay, that will be a little bit out, let's say this far down. Okay, so that's a frame. Stop saying okay so much. Okay, all right. Stop saying all right so much. I know, it's endless. There's our frame. Let me make that clear. And, now I'm still committed. All right, I know I want the 1 point there, so I draw in the idea, again, of the horizon. I already have committed to the idea. I want the 1 point there. I know my center of vision now has to be there because I committed the VP. All I need is the VP to know that the eye level must be crossing here if I want to be in 1 point, and the center of vision must be crossing this way. And I know that I eventually have to lead to an SP and a real cone of vision because that's part of our package when we look into space anytime. It's always there. We just don't really think about it all the time. Okay, what might I want? Maybe I want, like, again, a river or a waterway coming this way, and who knows, maybe the shore is this way, it's a canoe race or something. Maybe it's actually here. I change my idea and go, no, that's not going to work. And that's what compositioning and thumbnailing is all about, is making decisions and changing them, because you're allowing yourself to give yourself variables. Just like these frames are variables, you're also sketching, erasing, changing. This whole idea of getting perfection right away, there's nothing I enjoy more than roughing out a composition, knowing because of my skill level as a painter and the perspective I know, I can just clean it up and then carve into it more formally. But I love the sketching process, not because it's necessarily the technique of beautiful sketching. It's getting real sizing and really excited about what I can really do with the picture because of the knowledge base that this has given me, as well as a lot of painting, you know, and drawing and everything else as well, and designing. Okay, so let's say we have a canoe shape or something, carrying supplies of some kind for some culture that we're not that familiar with, let's say. Okay, so I draw an idea of these canoe going to one point, let's say, and there's some cross beams. And you happen to say, oh, one of the important design factors of the cross beams is that they were actually perfect squares because that was part of the ceremony. Okay, so no matter what, in the middle of these canoes, that one's tipping a little bit. There's the water. You know, so no matter what's happening, I'm going to say there's got to be a real square in the middle of these canoes. That's just part of the deal. Okay, so we'll do this one more, and let's say we start with a square here and draw around that and say, okay, I think there's something like that. Starting to pull out of the cone a little bit, but we'll keep going. And then there's the center line going up. This one's coming real close to us, right under our camera, or our view, actually, I should say. Just a real quick sketch and say, okay. Okay. Kind of tip it under and exaggerate it, so that kind of thing. Okay. So, you know, this might be crossing water because there's wind going across it. Whatever you want, you keep designing. The idea here is, though, oh, yeah, but these things that are part of the ceremony are squares. Okay, let's shoot over what I think is a basic depth of square here. I haven't committed to the cone yet. I haven't committed to any of this. I just mentioned the cone because that's where we have it, because we put it here before. But all you have is your eye level and vanishing point and center of vision idea, because that's all you've committed to, and this frame. So now I'll walk, you know, and go, oh, okay, let's see. If I want to commit to, you know, a particular square, you decide that that angle is what you want. So that immediately, doing that one little canoe square, immediately commits you to this measuring point. Already, the whole process starts because you already have an eye level, you already have a vanishing point, which commits you to a center of vision that goes down forever. You suddenly make that one diagonal commitment, and that lands on the eye level and becomes the 45-degree measuring point. Then you know the process takes you backwards to find your SP, which then commits you to the cone, which gives you a real cone markation here. So again, we did the sketch first, but we know we did the setup first, but we're pretending we did the sketch first, and we're allowing the compositional angles we want and feel out in our sketch and want as an artist will lead us and subordinate the perspective to us. But once we commit to what are those squares, then the second one has to be come back to like this and say, oh, that one got a little long. The actual one here would be like this. Now, that's not saying you can't use a style where you simply exaggerate everything. I am in no way saying that it might look great to exaggerate this one as it comes down more. Or B, you could say, if I wanted to be in correct perspective, I could simply get this same exact horizon arrangement with a little bigger square right at the same hugging of the horizon line in the center of vision, and I could simply draw this frame out larger, and then you'd get more of that pull as you got out of the cone more. So not only can I can draw more exaggerated, but all I'm implying by doing that is that this frame is a little bigger and this is being tugged out of the cone more. So it's both. It's drawing differently, but it's also committing you to being stretched out of the cone more. So maybe you like the idea of the perspective, able to control the idea that this is a normal square, but this one's pulled out more. That just means maybe compositionally you want to be down there, and you simply enlarge your frame, therefore enlarging the proportion of your composition. So this canoe is pulling out more here. That will give you that stretched look. So you can use what you know about distortion outside the cone and in the cone being normal to your advantage. So if I wanted to make an exception here, I'd maybe just draw down further over, and proportionally come diagonally through and just make my sketch this much bigger. Okay, that's going to give me more pulling if I proportionally enlarge this composition and do it that way. So you could just do another sketch assuming that, right over that. You could erase this and go, okay, I got my bigger frame. I'm going to erase this content in my mind right now and do another layer digitally and just do it so I get the right pull I want from that front canoe. Okay? And that's it. It's thinking about what we can do in here as an artist to subordinate the perspective the way we want it to affect and help us design and keep helping us compose. Okay? Critical. All right? Center of vision. Here we are, and we'll play another composition game here real quick. I'll finish these other ones up pretty fast here. I just happen to have, again, an asymmetrical design that I want way out here. Okay, this clearly puts us in our mind above the eye level, so we're thinking about it being somewhere down here. I can draw in a building, know it goes to here, right? Know there's a corner here, okay? I could do another building here in one point, draw it out. Also know that it goes down here compositionally. Maybe I want a real long one here. Draw it out differently. Connects to that. I'm just drawing basically to the idea of where I want my vanishing point. But again, the minute I'm drawing to it, I realize that 1 point vanishing point, if in truth, I know I want this in 1 point because all the verticals are straight up and down. Therefore, I'm not looking at the 3 point. I'm actually in a little frame that's way at the top of the cone. So it gives the impression of looking up because in a sense we are with our lines of sight, but we're not technically raising our heads. That would be 3 point, and we're not in 3 point. We're in the higher part of the cone in 1 point. Let me make that clear. So, okay. And then we could have little people here that are like, I don't know, waiting for evil villains to show up. They're superheroes, whatever you want. This person would be a little smaller, a little bigger, really small. You know, again, the idea is they're waiting for somebody to show up. I'm going to draw under them a bit. Real heroic poses, whatever. Got windows. We have all this stuff. Again, it's just the idea of a composition that is in itself interesting and long and narrow for a painting. That might be an interesting composition. But you still have to think about, oh, I like the composition, but don't be too in love with the frame only. Be in love with the idea of where the frame fits around this because you know perspective. Then you can be in love with your clever, long format horizontally and your interesting arrangements of the front faces of the building. But now you actually have a reason why it's behaving a certain way. And again, we can always think of, oh, that's right. What would be a square, let's say, on this building, working back from here? So if I know that this goes back in space as a transparent idea, and I say, okay, how deep would I want a square if it was critical that this building, I understood, you know, why it's a square. And, you know, I could say, oh, okay, I want it to be that to be the square for this building. That's transparent. That's looking into the building's interior and realizing the square. And then, okay, that would be 1 square deep, or 1 width wide, 1 width deep. Where does that leave us? Well, it leads about back to here. That's what I planned. Right, so again, you thought of this first, this idea of wanting that depth of square first, then that led you back to here. Or you could say I wanted the cone here, and again, you can take, it's very simple, like with the compass. You can take, if you wanted the cone right outside here or going right through here and you wanted to design that, you could simply take the idea of that on your actual sketch and say, okay, now that I'm committed to this vanishing point, this eye level, and this center of vision, if I actually take the cone down to where I know the eye level would be, oh, I reverse back to the, at 60 degrees like we talked about over here, and I automatically get my SP. I could do it that way from the relationship of where I want my cone, knowing where my eye level center of vision is, knowing the SP is down there somewhere. I actually take the cone here, and then I reverse back at 60 to get this shape we're using. Then I know where my SP is. Or I could reverse back from the 45-degree measuring point, coming back at 45. Either way, I get my committed SP on my center of vision, and I know how to use it to help me to draw the rest of the stuff, which might have 2-point elements and or measuring a whole bunch of other squares because I have my 45. You don't need to fill in all this mechanical work, but if you want to, it's there waiting for you. You might just want a 45-degree measuring point on some basic idea that you're drawing to over here and never do anything further. Great. doesn't matter. But we're learning perspective. So instead of showing you some professional technique where somebody's saying, hey, just do this, I'm a pro, I'm great, just do this, you don't need all that crap. Bull. If you want to learn perspective like a lot of good professionals, they learn this stuff in some sense, and a lot of us learn it really well, and it really, makes you very, very flexible with this kind of stuff. So it's critical that you learn this stuff along with some of the more dry measuring we're going to be doing too. All that gives you that three-dimensional platform to think about space. It's important because it's simple, basic fundamentals of perspective, but it's going to help you have a real new relationship with composition, control over objects, getting these sketches down fast so you can get up to size and really be more authoritative with the paint and the drawing, because you're placing your compositions and your basic lead movements of your compositions are correct or working, let's say. Okay, so we've just done another reversal from this one now, or the idea we could say I want the cone here. I could come back down from here, that distance, slam it down to the eye level, which commits me coming back to here to meet my center of vision, and suddenly I got all the rest. And then I automatically have a 45, by the way. If we did the cone of vision version and came down here and reversed back to the SP, immediately we have to come up at a 45 over here, because that's automatic if I already found my cone first, because the 45 behaves the same way as the cone from a particular station point. And we reversed it all from this little dinky sketch up here, just the idea of this square or where we wanted the cone. You got either one is your choice in one point, let's say. Okay, so again, we could have a really little sketch over here. Again, not quite making it to the eye level, but just a little tiny bit, and then there could be a picture just committed to there. And again, you just have the idea of a building standing here, one point, another building coming out. We're not sure what it's doing, maybe out here. If you want to extend your frame, you can play with any idea you want. The idea is, if this is transparent, what square am I working back to again, or where do I want this in relationship to the cone? So if you take this distance out to the cone and then slam it down, you've just committed backwards to your SP by going back at 60 degrees, 30, 60, with this shape. And then you already know what your SP is too. If you want to relate any other perspective in 2-point, you at least have the station point committed. So again, work backwards, even from a simple, tiny little sketch that only has a frame this big in the cone. You can do anything you want. And again, the idea of the square would be, where would I want this to land? And if I kind of say, oh, okay, about right here, I'd work backwards and shoot it out here if I wanted to. Same idea is that square gives me that 45 in this little sketch. It commits me to this whole process, basically, knowing that's the eye level. I've had a 1 point I've been working to, which commits me to a center of vision. Coming down, working backwards at 45, it gives me an SP automatically, and it automatically gives me that size of a cone. So again, this stuff is all interconnected. I do this first, it commits me to that, and I can think about that. I do this first, it commits me to that. It all works overlapped in different orders. Whatever helps, okay? And yeah, again, we could have another composition down here. And we could have a road coming by, late at night or something, spooky, with woods and stuff right here. And, it could be, it's really conservative perspective, but if you wanted to measure, again, a car on the ground and say, okay, for something this wide, what would be the depth I'd want? And then, the minute you make that commitment, even in a thumbnail, you're really saying, oh, I'm committing to that 45 and saying that's the depth I want to, measuring space if I'm doing a car or something happening on the road. You could also say, oh yeah, but I want the cone to be coming through right here. You could take this distance again, slam it up to here, that commits you to that angle back to the center of vision. Because you were using a vanishing point and you knew you wanted your eye level way up there, that already makes some commitments to the vanishing point. Then, once you decide that, or where you want the cone brought up to here, reverse, you get the SP, you commit to the whole cone. It all works hand in hand again. It's just what composition as an artist drives the use of the perspective. Make the perspective subordinate, okay? So I think we've said that enough. Yeah, and that's about it. So these are really crude, but it makes the point that all these elements are intermeshed to help you when you need it, and to be thinking of them as you're drawing, and then to lead to them. They'll all kind of interplay as a very helpful, controlled way to draw, and you can get all the exaggeration you want and put all the gesture you want into your drawing. But that doesn't mean the perspective shouldn't be helping you. Okay? All right. That was a long one, but I think it's good to discuss this stuff in a casual manner. So that's our cone of vision over there. Okay? Okay. We'll go on to the next one. All right. We are at lecture 2, diagram 18. And this one I've already laid out a little bit on here so I can get going and be accurate as to what I'm saying to you on this big piece of paper. We're going to start with a side view, and we're going to be at a 5-foot eye level, 7 feet away from a picture plane, and then right up next to the picture plane, going behind the picture plane, will be a 3 by 3 by 3 foot cube. And we're going to do that in side view, top view, and then in perspective from the top view of the station point person. So the idea is we're going to do the side view and the top view and the perspective view so we can relate them over and over again. If you get confused by these concepts, you can relate to this very simple setup because we're going to show you all three. Okay? So the first one we're going to do is we're going to have a person standing here. All right. Okay. And there's the ground plane, so I'm just going to draw that in. And I'm going to draw past the picture plane, which I'll explain in a second. Okay, so that's the ground. Abbreviate that, ground plane. That's a side view, so that's just the ground he's standing on. All right. I realize I have to draw darker than normal because of that camera, so okay. And again, that distance line, right from the eyes at a 5-foot level, goes on and also goes on to infinity. So we'll go ahead and do that idea. That's our distance line. Okay. And that's our picture plane. And I'm going to put that as like a piece of glass, so a little bit of thickness to it. There's the front, a little bit. All right, so that's our picture plane. All right, so let me count out 7 feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to the picture plane. Just the imaginary wall or flat surface, there it is. Same distance to there. 5 feet up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That goes up to 6 foot, okay? All right, snap goes the little pencil. All right, so also, we're saying there is a 3 by 3 by 3 cube right flush up against the picture plane. So I'm going to make that nice and dark. 1, 2, 3. One, two, three. So I'll draw up about as far as we need to be. And then we'll cast 3 feet from here. Or if we want, we'll double check it from our little T-square ruler. All right, 1, 2, 3. So there's the mark. So that cube is 3 feet high, 3 feet deep, 3 feet wide. All right, I wanted to make that nice and dark because that's our object. along with the figure. There's no other object here, really, except the figure, the cube, and the ground. Ground is probably a floor, so we'll put that in nice and dark. Now go ahead and count. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 foot for the picture plane. Then we're going back 1, 2, 3 for the cube. All right. So you're getting the idea. This is absolute side view. Elevation. All right. Side view elevation. Try to darken this in because I know the camera thing's pretty light. All right. So we have our distance line. We have a 5 foot, maybe a 5'4" person, 5 foot eye level, standing 7 feet away from a standing picture plane. And we have a 3 foot cube. Why do we know? There's our true height line that we used to show in perspective, but now everything's flat because it's a side view, no perspective. All right, so 3 by 3 by 3 cube. Okay, we know that's the picture plane. What else do we need to know? Let's see. Obviously, this is the depth of the cube, which is... All right, so we know this is depth. We can't see width. So in a side view elevation, we can't see width. We can only see depth and height. And of course, in a plan view, we can only see width and depth and not height. So we need both, essentially. All right, so there's a person. They're 5 foot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, same idea. All right, so that's pretty much all we need for our elevation side view. Then I'm going to go ahead and show the projection for the cone of vision in blue for that person. And as we know, that is 30 degrees. Let me try to stay out of your way in some way here. All right, take it from the very point of the eyes, the station point, which I have to also marcate that, of course. Cannot forget about that. Just as an arrow. Okay. We're not going to be able to see much of the next part of the cone, obviously. We'll go right off camera, but we'll overdraw it so it goes off camera somewhere. We know that's 30 and 30. 30 degrees, total 60. All right? We know that from before. So we know the cone in the diagram will be striking here and way up there somewhere. So we're not going to have the entire cube in the cone. The ground line, picture plane, measuring line, as we talked about in diagram 1 of the 3/4 view of the figure looking at the wall, we won't be able to see that unless we go out of the cone, which is fine for our purposes. Excuse me. So, let's identify. Obviously, this is also the eye level. No question about it. And, you know, in another sense, the center of vision, too. The picture plane, even though it's in side view representing the picture plane from the side, is also the center of vision running up and running down as well. But we can really only see the eye level technically, and just the side of the picture plane, the side of the cube, the ground from the side, like it's all a cutaway. Okay, so you're getting the idea. Now, let's just replicate this. I have this person aligned, you know, so right there at the eyes, shoulders, little feet coming out. Okay, that's the idea of the same person from above now. And that person does also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus the cube. So I'll go ahead, darken in that line. That will still be our distance line. Okay. We're going to take our time here so we get comprehension of the conversions and or why we're looking at space like this. Again, is that three-dimensional platform. All right. So That's the ground, and that's part of the side view. Right next to that, we're cutting away in our imagination to a top view right next to it. And there's not much space between, but I had to fit it all into the camera frame. So now, we're going to also say that the picture plane is also right here. I'm going to make a little division and start this picture plane a little further down and say there's the division between the two views. They happen to be lined up. The convenient part about this kind of work is that you can always draw an elevation right next to a plan, or a plan right next to an elevation, because they share everything. If you just go, this is here, that is there. These distances all are shared. The cube's depth is shared. So the difference is, obviously, we can't see the side view from here, and we can't see width here, but otherwise they share all their measurements. Okay, so let's go ahead and measure what would be our ground line measuring line from above on our picture plane. Just make sure we get those increments right. So we'll start from the center of vision. 1, 2, and then we'll go over this way. All right, so we've got this going now. That's right there, and we've got this going. So now we can't go that far into this picture, we bump into it, but you'll get the idea. It just happens I'm going to set the cube is not going to be centered in the view. So let's draw the cube in now. And that cube is going to be 2 feet over to the left and 1 foot there. That way it won't bump into our picture. So I'll use my T-square to be exact. Okay? So the idea would be, we'll count 1, 2, 3 foot cube, but it's a foot over to the right if we're looking in view. Okay? And there's the third mark for the back, so I'll go ahead and put that in with my triangle. And we can just infer its depth by our elevation above. We don't really need to count it out, it's right there. So do that nice and dark to imply that's an object. Okay. All right, so that's also our 3 by 3 by 3 cube. This is our distance line, as well as our center of vision, right? This is still our picture plane from above. Oops, E. So when I keep going on and on about how the picture plane is just this thin piece of glass from above, when we set up our normal cone of vision, that's what I mean. There it is, and there's us, like our normal station point from above, 7 feet, 7 feet, 7 feet, 7 feet, okay? So, what else do we need? Let me make sure I've got everything marked. That's the picture plane, obviously. From above, we have no height. We've got our cube. That's our distance line, which keeps going. We know this is our true height line. We won't make it, we'll just call it the picture plane, but we know our true height line is actually set on the picture plane, or can be, I should say. Okay, distance line. Let's project the cone of vision then. Or I should say the lines that hit the cone of vision. And I'll go ahead and put a blue line in our elevation above just to markate that this is the live cone of vision area right here. Goes on up out of screen, okay? All right. And then I'll project the cone of vision from this person with my 30 degrees, right up to the old eyeballs. And they should be right about there. So, okay. And that hits and connects with the picture plane and keeps going forever to vanishing points. But we also take note, that's where the cone of vision or the field of distortion is. I'm also going to do this, but I'm going to have to stop short so I don't crunch into our elevation above. But I'll just lightly go, make it very clear that this projects on forever at 30. And eventually, of course, hits the picture plane. I'll actually kind of mark that in. I don't think it will make too many people go mad if I just kind of imply that this one crosses over to here, just very lightly. All right, so that would be that. 30 and 30, because this is all of our picture plane really, but we kind of went in and make a division between the top view, which I should label, hello, make it clear. Top view. Okay, so let me make our person a little more dark because of the film making everything. Okay, So there's our distance line, and we have that. All right, so what else am I missing here? I'll just think here. Okay, so now I'm hoping you can see a direct relationship between an elevation from the side, what's happening. The cube is pushed right up against the picture plane, as we've talked about. The cube is obviously sitting on the ground as the person is sitting on the ground. This person now, we're from above, and we've decided to put the cube off center, 2 foot to the right, 1 foot to the left, flush against the picture plane here. Picture plane, yep, okay. And we know this also represents the eye level, essentially, too, somewhere in there. We just can't see the difference between the ground line measuring line, which is also there, the eye level, and the fact that it's a picture plane because it's all from above. We have no height to be able to demonstrate that. But it's all there. You know it from our different views and different talks we've had. Okay, so now I want to make clear this is also 1, 2, and 3 feet deep, just as this is 1, 2, 3. This is the cube's depth. I can just measure it on the center line. It doesn't matter. We know it's 3 feet deep by 3 feet wide by 3 feet high because that tells us so. Okay, so let's go on to our perspective view setup. We're still going to do another plan view setup exactly the same as this actually, but over here so we can be more ready to understand it because we're going to do it in normal view like we've been setting up over and over ago with things reading this way. Okay, so I'll go ahead and draw in the idea of the head, the face a little bit with the nose looking out. There's our station point right there. Little feet. All right, there's our person from above. Our station point's right there. Let me make sure I very clearly write station point. Station point. That would be a good idea. Hello. And station point. All right, SP, 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 obviously. We've been talking about that a lot. Okay, so now I got to do some measure increments. I'll give myself my 7 feet forward, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And of course, I'm using 1-inch increments to represent feet. And that's pretty easy. And again, if you're doing it on a much smaller piece of paper or you want to do it on an 11 by 17 piece of Xerox paper, whatever you want, then you can make your 1 foot marks a 1/2 inch, whatever works for you, of course. You know, I would probably suggest you just watch this whole thing and then draw it out after pausing it and then rerunning it because, you know, this is really important connection that you're kind of having to think through and watch through first, I would say. Then figure out what kind of paper could I do this on to really, you know, as a permanent record and understanding and walking through the idea of the elevation side view, the top view, and the top view going into perspective. So we got our 7 feet, and we'll keep going in depth then because we can. So, okay, so I'm not going to put numbers by these because they represent 2 things, and I'll tell you why in a second, all right? But just know that this is 7 feet to the picture plane. We know that, so this person is 7 foot from the picture plane. So from PP, 7 foot from the picture plane, this person is. They're also 5 foot high, eye level. We know that. So what else do we know? Well, we know the cube's going to be coming, but we're going to do that in a second. I'm going to darken in this line just so it's more visible on film. And we know that's our center of vision. So, and we know this is our eye level. All right, so, oh, and then I'll go ahead and darken in this idea. And that will kind of bump into that one, like a lot of these things do. That's our eye level. And I'm going to hold off putting increments on this because I'm going to put increments on the ground plane measuring line that you saw again on the physical walkthrough and on diagram 1 in the 3/4 view of the figure looking at the wall and all those different definitions. Now, so I've got my man or my person, I've got the distance to the picture plane, I've got my picture plane, and I'll go ahead and put in, before I draw the cube, I want to go ahead and put in my cone of vision, the projections for the cone of vision, actually draw the cone of vision as well as put in my 45 measuring point, 45 degree measuring point. So let me find my blue, here it is. Once again, no surprise, we're going to go at 30 degrees and 30 degrees from the actual station point. Coming very close to that cube. It's all right. It's all one big happy diagram, so who cares if they overlap? They're all family. Who cares, right? Okay, so here we go. That's where I'm going to draw my compass. So let me get my handy dandy compass. All right. This thing has seen better days, but I keep it around out of sentiment really, but lame. Anyway, that is the cone. I apologize for its terrible lack of stiffness and whatever. But you can see it. There's the cone of vision. Okay, so now here's that part I was talking about a couple diagrams ago, actually. We can count down from the eye level, just like we did for our scaling in some of the first earlier diagrams. But now we can really get the idea of why we do it. But first of all, we're going to put in our 1 point, VP 1 point. We know that. We're going to put in our 45-degree measuring point as well. Okay, from the eyes right there, it's going to come, oops. All right. Okay. There we go. That's our 45-degree measuring point. Put it over there for convenience, it won't get in the way. Okay. And again, this is going to be a very simple diagram or a simple drawing because it's not about the complexity of the object, certainly. It's about the three-dimensional platform in your mind making the connection between why we're looking at the same information in an elevation compared to a plan from above with the object included and the figure and the distances, and why we also have the traditional setup with the figure from above and us here looking in like we know this flattened SP person is really out here, us, okay, and the cone. So there we kind of have it. Oh, and I've got the center of vision listed, my eye level, station point, cone of vision. So we're all set to go. So here's the trick. Because our eyes are always attached here, so I'll draw those silly eyes on here again. Hello. Okay. Our eyes are always stuck here. So if I want to go down and, you know, if I know the viewer and the ground line is 5 feet down, the idea that we know we are 5 feet in the air because we've declared this person's eyes at 5 feet. We can't count up, we have to count down from the eye level because our eyes are always here. But since this is our true height line, and we want, and the box is touching the very picture plane at the true height line, all we have to do is count down 5 to put our measuring line down 5 feet below, just like when we scaled the figures by counting down from the eye level. We're doing the same thing now, imagining that scale 1 inch equals 1 foot is only true on this flat picture plane. Everywhere we can go, 1 inch equals 1 foot. As soon as we go back, scale gets smaller, come forward, it gets larger. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? So the idea is we're 5 feet in the air. This person is 5 feet in the air from the ground line hitting the picture plane. So that's called the ground line measuring line. So we have to make ours 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's way down here below the cone. Remember I mentioned that this lets us know we're going to be, you know, see? That's the reality of that same projection. There's our cone crossing that exact increment. It crosses right below that 4th increment. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right below it's the cone. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the cone. Side view, proof. Side view, top view, proof. And now 1 foot down. So I'm going to go ahead and put my ground line measuring line in, which represents the ruler I'm placing exactly where this illusionary wall hits the ground plane and comes forward toward us. Why do we know that? Because it goes down 5 feet and then the floor comes toward the person.
So the idea is we know we're standing on a flat ground plane that runs into a wall 7 feet in front of us. How do we know we're 7 feet away? Oh, that's right. Our SP distance is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the equivalent here. So the weird part when we're looking in perspective, with the true height line looking into perspective, we can count down to get our measuring line height on the ground. This actual ruler is on the ground, which we'll put increments on in a second. The other part is, in the flat world, where this is the picture plane from above, and this is all flat work, including looking down on our SP person, they're 7 feet away. So it works both ways. It's the same scale. It has to be. Because we're saying everything at the point of the picture plane and everything in flat space is equal to 1 inch equals 1 foot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's how you both count back to the distance of your SP from the flat idea of the top of the picture plane, as well as count down from the eye level that our eyes are part of, down to where you want your measuring line, just like we did with the scaling of the figures. I don't remember which diagram it was, one of the earliest ones, like 2, 3, number 3, I think. That's the same idea. So let me put my increment scale on here now, if I can find my little ruler. Okay, here we go. I'll just count either side. 1 foot, which is 1 inch. I'll just put it down and just keep going on way, way longer than I need to, just to make a point. Okay. Okay, so that's that measuring line, ground measuring line. Why does that help me? Because that's where our cube starts. That's this point here. So if you want to make it clear, that's our ground plane measuring line. The floor touching the wall. This is our floor coming in like this toward the 1 point vanishing point, like planks of wood touching the wall, which starts here and goes flat like a wall, okay? So we are just simply saying the cube is right behind that piece of glass. Now, we said it was 1 foot to the left, 2 feet to the right. So I'll go ahead and go, 1 foot to the left, 2 feet to the right. Okay, so I start drawing up at that point. Okay, and how far do I go up? 1, 2, 3, because it's a 3-foot cube, so that's my true height line. And it also represents the distance of the SP looking from above as the third person. But in this case, I'm going 1, 2, 3 in height. I'll draw a little past, nice thick line. Little past, nice thick line. Make sure we make it a little thicker down here. And then 1, 2, 3. There's my front face of my cube. Okay. All right. What do we need to do next? Like we've been doing many times, we've got to draw our side planes back toward the 1 point vanishing point. So there's my ground plane. I'll just kind of have it disappear. I won't have it cling to the vanishing point. Here, disappears. Get out of the way here. Goes back, disappears. Fourth corner, back, disappears. All right, so now you guys can all tell me, how do we find depth? We've rehearsed it a bit. Well, since we need a real 45 to make the 45-degree measuring point, we now go kitty corner from the 45-degree measuring point on our eye level, and we strike across at a perspective 45, which is represented to go to the 45-degree measuring point, and we should be able to strike a real depth of the square. Now it's getting a little distorted. We are pulled out of the cone, but the idea is the way it's been designed to kind of crunch into this tight space, but still be a big diagram. I decided to go ahead and have the measuring line a little bit below the cone of vision. Just like with my physical lecture, the wall was actually just off camera below the cone of vision. This wall is a little bit below the cone of vision. In my diagram, my big real diagram I drew on my studio wall, it's actually, the floor was a good deal lower than the cone of vision. So let's go ahead and go kitty corner to the 45. There it is. So it's going to look a little bit stretched. on the ground plane, but not up here, because this square that represents the top of the cube will be well within the cone of vision. But as we've been playing with the idea with the compositional sketches we did last time and a few other ideas with the cubes coming out of the cone, it's okay. If it doesn't look too stretched, it should be okay. But the idea as a learning tool, it's fine to be out of the cone, because then we can see what happens when you're out of it. You get a very clear example. So let's go ahead and draw back that back plane on the ground to make the footprint complete of our cube. Okay? And let's go ahead and get up and get those side planes up in the back. And they go ahead and connect with our front perpendicular planes going back to the VP, and we close off. And there is our 3 by 3 by 3 cube in perspective from 7 feet away. So let's discuss this again. If we were to look at this as a flat plan from above, like we've spoken about many times now, there is the flat, thin top of the picture plane, the distance line from above to the station point person, and then that person standing straight below us. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We are, as a viewer, we are 7 feet away from the picture plane at a 5-foot eye level. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Counting backwards from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means that where our feet are is at the same place as this measuring line back. That means that our feet are met up by the floor down here somewhere when we're looking into the picture. And that means we're standing on the ground plane and our eye level is at 5 feet. Therefore, we can say we have a 5-foot eye level, plus the person's a little bit taller than that with the cranium and all that. So 5-foot eye level, 7 feet away, and we are standing 1 foot to the left off center. No, I'm sorry, 1/2 foot from the center of a cube over to the left. The actual center of the cube would be right here between these two, actually, right there. Okay, so we're standing, we can say we are standing 7 feet away from the front of a cube at a 5-foot eye level, and we are standing 1/2 of a foot to the left of the center of the cube. You could phone in those directions to someone on Maya or a 3-dimensional program and simply, show them this and say, that's my increment. And basically these drawings are a plan just like everything else, and then they're grown into three dimensions. And that's what, of course, the 3D programs do so fantastically fast. The interesting part, though, about when you draw this out, you really get the 3-dimensional platform rehearsed in your mind, because you suddenly realize as a drawing in 2D, if you're working digitally as well on your computer screen, you can do these type of drawings pretty quickly from real plans and stuff, and really, for your own purposes, really get a 3-dimensional scene going. And it even helps, again, with sketching, as we've talked about in the compositional cone of visions we did previously. So, again, side view, 7 feet away, 5 foot high of a 3 by 3 by 3 cube. On top of a top plan, same thing, shows the cone of vision projection and everything. The 45 would actually be going out to here, actually, but we don't need to show it because we're showing it here. And then here's our perspective view of being 5 feet in the air, eye level, 7 feet away from a 3 by 3 by 3 cube, and we're standing 1/2 of a foot to the left of center of the cube, okay? And that's pretty much it. If there's anything I forgot to label. So there you go. So elevation, top view, build up and view in perspective of that idea. Okay. Here we are, we're back, and we're going to draw a 10 by 10 by 10 room from 12 feet away at a 6-foot eye level. All right, so now that we've kind of talked about this kind of thing, we'll put it into action. Then after that, we'll do one more diagram about working backwards from a sketched composition with some thoughts of a building scene and a couple figures in sketch form, and then work backwards into formal 1 point after that. But right now we're going to do a gridded room that's showing, you how to measure more and be more comfortable with measuring and the concept of measuring in one point. Okay, so I'm going to use 3/4 inch increments to represent a foot this time. So let me get in my center of vision. I got my eye level in here, obviously. So let me darken up my center of vision idea here. Okay. Okay, so the idea is I'll still put in my station point right here. So I'll put my little man's head, body, feet. That's my SP. That's supposed to be 12 feet away. This eye level is supposed to be at 6 foot. And we're going to be doing a 10 by 10 by 10 room with some objects in it. I'll go ahead and draw in my cone of vision just for a good exercise. We'll keep doing this, even though when you sketch, again, as I've mentioned many times, the idea is, get used to these elements being underneath in your idea of sketching or very lightly put in, just enough for you to understand what the cone's doing and where your distortion field is when you're drawing. It doesn't have to be all heavy and formal. It can be cobweb thin, just little marks, and then keep sketching. As long as you have an understanding where distortion starts by placing your SP even below a sketch, it's easy, okay? All right, so we're going to keep doing this. We're going to do this one more rapidly now so we know what we're doing, right? I'll still mark everything. 30 degrees, total of 60. Okay. Get our compass out here. Seeing better days on this thing. So, all right. Gonna have to pull out an old trick. I don't have a compass that big, so what I'm going to do is use a cord. And I'm simply going to plant the cord like this right there and draw up like that. And draw like that. Because my compass isn't big enough, so excuse my black cord. But I must do this because I don't want to stop. All right? All right. All right, there's my cone. Sorry about that. My compass, I forgot I don't have my large one. Okay, so there's my cone. And let's mark everything carefully. VP, 1 point. Still, all right. Got our eye level at 6 foot, center of vision. I'll put that right there. Center of vision. Got our SP down here, so we're ready to go. There's our setup. So I'm going to put my increments in now. 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. These are 3/4 inch increments I'm using. I'm going to count back 12. Okay. There we go. And I'll keep going up. Because remember, we're 12 feet from the picture plane, but then the idea of height needs to keep going up. And we'll explain why. I can even go 1 off the picture, it doesn't matter. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We count down from the eye level, remember? This is where our eyeballs are. Okay? And we have to count down from the eye level, or I should say, I'm sorry, back from the picture plane, excuse me, the picture plane. This is the top of the picture plane, distance line, our SP person from above. Remember, the same distance would be our real SP as a viewer, and we have collapsed it into the flat SP viewer, okay? So that is now that our viewer, or us, we are 12 feet away from a 6 foot eye level. So what does that mean? Oh, that's right. When we're looking in view into perspective, that's our true height line. So I have to count down from my eyeballs and say 6 feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's the threshold of my 10 by 10 by 10 room. We're going to pretend that there's a pretend measuring line threshold before we go into the space of the room, which is behind the picture plane. So essentially, we'll do a sketch of it in a second, actually. It's quite simple. But I'll go ahead and put in my measuring line. And that represents, again, the ground hitting the flat wall, okay? And I'll go ahead and put in my 45-degree measuring point. I'm going to do mine off because it's more convenient to the left. Okay. There we are. Right up to the eyeballs of my SP person, my collapsed SP person. Project up. Got that. 45-degree MP. All right. That's a real 45. Okay. Projected. All these are from above, projected in real angles from our station point viewer. Then we're going to realize those same angles in perspective to help us measure as before. Okay. So there's my measuring line. So I'll just make that clear. I'll also put increments now on my measuring line, ground line. I'm just going to keep going here. And also put increments to the left on that line. Again, you can, when you sketch, you can think like this, but you're not actually doing this. It's the thinking and the visualization of space in a 3D manner that we're trying to get good at. So this greatly helps, even though you might not do technical drawings very often. But actually they help if you're really doing something clean and thoroughly. You can build stuff very quickly this way as well. So, but there's a relationship between the technical and sketching. It can be both. So there's a lot of gray area in between. Okay. So let's figure out here, and well, let's number some stuff across, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. But first of all, we want to figure out where the threshold of our room is. And why do I say that? Let's see, we've got some room over here. This is our figure, let's say, at 6 foot. There's our figure standing there. There's the ground. Picture plane's about 12 feet away. It's about 6 foot, so 12 feet away, let's say. It's a 10-foot room, so he's 6 foot tall. About there would be a threshold. We're looking at a 10-foot by 10-foot room. Something like that. Room's 10 feet high. We're at the threshold, so there's the picture plane. Picture plane, 10-foot room, and we're going to put some stuff in this 10-foot room. We're in front of the room at a 6-foot eye level. And we're 12 feet away. So our station point is 12 feet from here to here. Okay? So that's the deal. So we are looking at the ground plane, or the ground plane measuring line being right there. That's this line here from the side where our ground meets our invisible pretend front wall, but then there's really a threshold because it allows us to come into the room. So we're going from this point into the room. So we're measuring and saying the picture plane is the very front face of the cubicle room, 10 feet deep, 10 feet high, 10 feet wide, okay? And that's us 12 feet away at 6-foot eye level, okay? Just like before. Okay, now we got to decide, okay, I don't want to be standing right in the center, so I have to decide, do I want to be standing a little bit to the, which side? So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why don't we say we're standing 6 feet, we're going to be standing 1 foot to the left. So to skip over with this center of vision, 1 foot to the left from center of the room would mean there'd be a little more on the right than the left. So we'll count over 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here. That gives me, we're 1 foot over to the left, so it gives me 1, 2, 3, 4 to the threshold corner of the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 foot. 4 over here from center. And that gives me 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we're left 1 foot over to the left. Okay? Let's draw up the verticals of the front entrance or threshold of the room. from the ground plane measuring line. And I'll draw higher than I need to. That's the actual side plane of our little box room. There's the other one. Okay, and then we've got to count 10 feet up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 foot. And of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet down. So our feet are down here somewhere looking into the room. Our SP, never ends. Our SP is this far away, but actually tipped up here is the real position. We have simply compressed it or collapsed it. Okay? All right. Great. So let me go ahead and, so now we have the increments we need width-wise. I'm going to go ahead and close off the top of the room. Up there at 10 feet. And I'll go ahead and count our increments as well. So that's the top of the beginning of the room. So that's just the front face of the cube of the room facing us, and we'll count it out. But let's count it out, so if anybody's confused, we're 10 up. But we're going to go ahead and count it on the right side wall as well. Okay? So let's actually make it over here. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at eye level, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. I'll go ahead and label those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 foot, 7, 8, 9, that's 10, okay? Okay, and we also have from here, we'll call this, let's say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10, all right? Corner of the room, all right? Top corner, okay? Now we have to draw our side planes of our room, meaning that our floor meeting our walls as a floor line, wall line, and that would go back to the 1 point vanishing point. I'll kind of make it disappear. Also, so go in, disappear, okay? Also, our wall line turning into our ceiling would also go back. Okay. And yet again, the other one. Okay. We don't have depth yet, but that's what we have to measure with our good old 45-degree measuring point, because it comes off at a real 45 from our station point, which is really up here and then collapsed is here. And we're going to understand depth that way. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first count, and the counting will help me understand how we're moving in space. So let me go ahead and do that. If I want to go 10 feet back in space, I can count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and kitty corner, just like before, we go back over to our 45-degree measuring point, and that will give me the entire 10 feet of the depth of the room, because I've counted over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in flat space to then cut across and go over and get the equal depth as this space is, and that gives me 10 feet back. Then we're going to count back and understand how we got each increment and how it relates, okay? So let me first get the big one, and the big one is taking the whole 10 feet across, going to our kitty corner and lining up with a 45-degree measuring point. I go ahead and cast through and continue on. And there we are. And this point gives me my 10 feet of depth I need. So, and this is 45 degrees, and then this is 45 degrees in perspective, though. Remember, that's in perspective. P-E-R, perspective. Okay. I'm going to take my T-square then. And I'm going to go ahead and officially draw across that back wall. And I'm going to connect that to the other 4 walls, other 3 planes, I should say. All right. All right, let me make sure everything's true. Okay. There it is connecting up to that. And then I'll go ahead and close it off. Okay, so there's the back of my room. So we have the front threshold, walls going back. There's the back wall of the room, still transparent and such. I'm going to sharpen my pencil because we're going to do a grid or some gridding. It's pretty simple though, the gridding. Now that you understand the bigger spaces, we can say this. If we also take each foot back, and I'm just going to do a few of these. I'm hesitant to make this too dense and confusing. But if I step 1 foot over, I get 1 foot of depth. How do I do that? 1 foot over, kitty corner to 45-degree measuring point, strike. That's 1 foot of depth. 2 feet over, 2 feet of depth, okay? And so the idea that we can do it this way, but also it turns out because we took the entire width and then cast it into depth, it's also where some lines cross, this one red line will also give us all our depths too, which is really weird, but it happens that way and it works out great. So what I'm going to do first is like a wood floor, like a planked wood floor in a ballet studio or your living room, I'm going to draw all the planks that are going perpendicular to us back to the 1 point vanishing point. So that's half of the grid on the floor. So I'm going to start with number 9, go back, number 8, go back, 7, and so forth, all the way back to the left wall here. So I'm going to be pretty careful. I'll sharpen my pencil a couple times. No problem. We want to take time to do that. All right, trying to get my head out of the way here and not knock over anything important. Okay. So there we are. Now, because we went ahead and draw the big diagonal over to our 45-degree measuring point and we're getting the entire depth of the 10-foot room, it also happens that every time one of these increments cast back as a line toward the vanishing point crosses our red diagonal to our 45-degree measuring point, we get a single foot of depth. So here, right there, 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 here, here, there, here, here, and finally here. So very quickly we can see, oh, well then all I do is draw a cross horizontally and I get all the depths of my grid because I just got all my, well, I'm sorry, I get all the depths going across like this, bigger, smaller, 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 by going across those lines. I've got my widths, of course, by counting back to the vanishing point, so, which we just did. Okay, I'm going to start with the back, so I come forward. I'm going to start with crossing that one right there. Let me get my head out of the way. See? Every time these lines come and cross the diagonal, I get a new depth for each line that is corresponding to that mark. So I'll start way back here with 1 foot forward from the back wall now would be that line. I'll keep my pencil nice and sharp. Then 2 feet forward. I'm trying to be nice and precise here. I'll get out of your way. Oops, a little off. So here. There we go. All right. All right. So I had a little bit of a flubber there, but the idea is if you'd drawn it correctly and didn't flub it up like I did, it doesn't matter. The idea is it's real simple. If you have a clean, accurate diagonal and you have a real good, even incremented measurement here and you've cast back your perpendiculars to your vanishing point, you should get even diminishment coming up, each one. So I have to correct mine a little bit. That's all right. Let me get back there and correct it. That one goes back a little more like that. Okay. So now we can agree we have 10 foot across like a tile floor. Now we can also do a sidewall gridded because now it's easy. We have our increments up we drew before. We can cast those back to the vanishing point, as well as now each new increment of these depths that hits the corner floor hitting the wall here, we can draw straight up. So I'll just do it with you here. Sharpen my pencil again so I try to get precise. And we're just trying to get and understand how we move in reference in 1 point space. So I'll go ahead and draw number 9 up here to back. Remember, all we need is it going across the wall to the vanishing point. So I can stop at the wall essentially. There's 7. 6 is already done for us because it's the eye level, 6 foot eye level. 5, 4, oops. Okay. 3, 2, and 1. So, oops, 1 was low, so let me correct that. Okay, so now we've got our height cast back to the vanishing point in perpendicular planes to us, but then we also need our depths. So again, I have to use my T-square in my thing, and I've got it's this corner here, all these increments here, I have to cast straight up to get my grid on the wall. So I'm going to try to be careful and use my T-square correctly. So all right. Take your time so you get precise, so you get the idea of the movement. It's not a practice. It's not like, oh, I'll be doing this for the rest of my life just because I'm learning perspective. I have to draw these incredibly rigid mechanical drawings all the time. Wrong. It's learning how space diminishes and foreshortens, which allows you to recognize later how to draw space foreshortening accurately if you want to draw realistically. Again, for the gaming world, anything that uses real virtual space, if you want your own paintings to look pretty real, this helps a lot. That doesn't mean you can't exaggerate and stuff. It gives you a feeling, even if you don't like the measuring, any of that stuff, it's not important. The important thing is you're learning how to think in 3 dimensions here in your mind, so you don't need to try to feel it out only and say, this isn't making sense. Where do I back up and start? These ideas of referencing we've done, and this grid is just a part of it. It's just 3-dimensional thinking inside your mind on a 2-dimensional surface. Okay, so now we have all the increments we need to draw inside the room. I'm not going to make you do the entire room as a grid. A, it's really busy looking and can give you a headache, and B, we don't really need any more because we can put any object on the floor now and reference the wall for height. And we can reference anywhere on the floor making a footprint of any object, which we're going to do in a second. So the idea is that we can, whoopsie, now there goes my other colored pencil. Fantastic. Let me just check something here. Cool. Okay, so we'll do that later. All right. So now that's it. We are now standing 12 feet away from this front threshold, and we are 6 foot in the air. So this ground plane measuring line is 6 foot down from our eye level, so we know we are 6 feet in the air. And we are standing in front of the room at 12 feet, and we are 1 foot to the left of the center of the room. I'm sorry, yes, 1 foot to the left. So we are now 4 over here, 6 over there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put a cubes in here, 2 or 3 of them, and a carpet in 2-point perspective, just for a little teaser there. Everybody's blood will rise. You'll be incredibly excited. We're going to do a little 2-point rug after we finish our cubes. All right, so I'm just giving you time to finish your grid. If you have any issues, remember, we cast everything neatly back from our numbers here. Then that diagonal, if it's done properly to the 45-degree measuring point, should be giving it. Each collision with those cast in lines perpendicular to us to the VP, we're getting a new depth. After we did that, we took our increments before, cast them back from the height on the wall to the vanishing point, and then simply followed all these connections up, straight up the wall, and got the side grid on the wall, okay? So let me get the pencil here. Okay. Let's just call out some instructions. So SP is 12 feet, that's 6 feet high, and it's a 10 by 10 by 10 room. So it is, let's just say, this is a 10 foot by 10 foot by 10 foot room. Kind of like the idea of our cube in the last one, but now it's a more complex idea. And we've gridded part of it, the floor and the left wall. Okay, so I want a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot cube, 1 foot from the right wall and 2 feet back from the threshold, the front threshold. So I'll say it again. I want a 3 by 3 by 3 cube, 1 foot away from the right wall, excuse me. So I'll say it again and correct myself. I want a 3 by 3 by 3 cube, 1 foot away from the right wall, 2 feet back from the threshold. So that means I have to be 1 foot away from the right wall and 2 feet back from the threshold. So the footprint would have to start here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And by the way, we can do any pattern we want on this grid. If we drew out a flat plan with a grid, like our bedrooms when we were kids, when we were asking permission to rearrange our rooms, and when you move and make a plan with, when you move, the same thing. You could draw an S-curve on here, you could do a snake, whatever, and you could then replicate that in perspective just following the same points on the grid. And we'll talk about that later. But we're essentially doing an incredibly basic form of this now with cubes. There's the footprint of my cubes. Why? Because I said I wanted a foot away from the right wall, 2 feet back from the threshold. And there's a 3 by 3 by 3 footprint, or I should say a 3 by 3 square. So let me draw in the footprint of the first cube we're going to put in. I'll make it thicker. Same the back wall here. Let me get out of the way. Okay. Go ahead and back to the vanishing point and draw that in. And the idea is this is the movement we want. There's our cube. I'll go ahead and tickle it in really lightly with the blue. Okay. Now I'm going to take the vertical walls out of the 4 corners, and I'm going to make that a little longer than I think they have to be. Overdraw them a bit. I'll start from the right side. Okay. Back one. Get back here for you. Front left. All right, so those are taller than I need. How do I reference 3 feet now? Well, conveniently, if I shoot all the way over to the left wall and hit the wall with this line and then climb 1, 2, 3 on that wall, I'm creating a reference plane. I'm going to go across here. So let me just do light red lines. And I'm going to go up from here 3 feet, 1, 2, 3 to that spot there. Then if I go like a spider cobweb, go right straight back and hit that front corner pole that I just put in, I've got 3 foot on that front corner, and that's all I need to draw in the rest of the square. So let me go back real lightly in red from that square, and we'll do it again to explain why that worked. Right back to there. Okay. I started on the footprint here and said, well, if I need to get a 3 foot reference, I don't have a grid on this wall, but if I shoot over here straight across and hit where the ground hits the wall and climb 1, 2, 3 grid points, 3 feet, and go straight back across the picture plane right there, I get the height of the cube at that corner. So I can start drawing in now. I'll draw in my thicker corner here. Great. Thicker corner here. All right, hold on a second. Okay, I'll go ahead and draw that point right there back to the picture plane for my side. There's my side plane. Then straight across for my front at the same height as my reference line. There we go. back from top right corner,